Have you ever taken a trade that moved into profit, watched it climb toward your target, and then closed it early because you were afraid the profit would disappear? Have you ever hit your price target, exited the trade, and then watched in frustration as the stock continued moving in your direction for hours or even days? Have you ever felt that overwhelming urge to just lock in the gain, get the money in your account, and stop worrying about what might happen next? If you answered yes to any of these questions, you're not alone. In fact, you're in the vast majority. Closing trades early is one of the most common and most damaging behaviors in trading, and it's not because traders don't know better. Most traders understand intellectually that letting winners run is crucial for profitability. They've read it in books, heard it in videos, seen it in their own back tests. Yet when they're in a live trade watching profits accumulate, something happens. The knowledge disappears. The plan goes out the window, and they click that exit button far earlier than they should. Why does this happen? What's going on psychologically that makes it so difficult to let a winner run? And more importantly, what can you do about it? Those are the questions we're going to answer today, because understanding the psychology behind this behavior is the first step to overcoming it. Let's start with what's happening in your brain when you're watching a profitable trade. According to research in neuroeconomics, the brain processes financial gains and losses in regions associated with reward and threat. When you see your position moving into profit, your brain releases dopamine, which creates a pleasurable sensation. This is your reward system activating, telling you that something good is happening. But here's where it gets interesting. That dopamine release is strongest not when you have the profit, but in anticipation of securing it. Research by neuroscientist Reed Montague has shown that the brain's reward system is most active during moments of anticipated reward rather than actual reward receipt. When you're watching your profit grow, your brain is in a state of heightened anticipation. It wants to resolve that anticipation, to convert the potential reward into a certain reward. Closing the trade provides that resolution. The moment you exit, you experience a sense of relief and satisfaction, not because the profit is larger, but because it's certain. Your brain prefers smaller certain rewards over larger uncertain rewards, a phenomenon that's been documented extensively in behavioral economics. But there's another neural mechanism at play. When you're holding a winning position, there's implicit uncertainty. The profit exists right now, but it could disappear. Your amygdala, the brain region responsible for processing threat and fear, remains somewhat activated as long as that uncertainty exists. According to research using functional MRI scans, uncertainty itself creates a mild stress response. Your nervous system is slightly uncomfortable with not knowing what will happen next. Closing the trade eliminates that uncertainty and the stress response associated with it. The relief you feel isn't just about securing profit. It's about eliminating uncertainty-induced stress. There's also a concept in neuroscience called temporal discounting. This refers to the tendency to value immediate rewards more highly than delayed rewards, even when the delayed reward is objectively larger. Studies have shown that the brain's limbic system, which governs emotional responses and immediate gratification, often overrides the prefrontal cortex, which handles long-term planning and rational decision-making. When you have a choice between taking profit now or potentially larger profit later, your limbic system pushes for the immediate option. The longer you hold the trade, the more this internal pressure builds. Your emotional brain is essentially screaming at you to take the certain gain and stop the discomfort of uncertainty. Understanding these neural mechanisms is crucial because it helps you realize that the urge to close early isn't a personal failing. It's your brain doing exactly what it evolved to do. In ancestral environments, immediate certain resources were almost always better than delayed uncertain resources. A bird in hand was literally better than two in the bush when resources were scarce and the future was dangerous. But in trading, this hardwired preference works against you because your edge often depends on occasionally capturing large moves that require holding through discomfort and uncertainty. Beyond the neurological drive for certainty, there's a powerful psychological factor at play: the fear of watching profit turn into loss. According to prospect theory developed by Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky, losses are psychologically about twice as painful as equivalent gains are pleasurable. This asymmetry creates what they call loss aversion, and it profoundly affects how traders handle winning positions. When you're in a winning trade, you're not just holding potential profit. You're holding potential loss of that profit. As the position moves further into profit, this potential loss grows larger. If you're up $300, there's now $300 you could lose if the trade reverses. Your brain doesn't process this as potential profit that might not materialize. It processes it as actual profit that could be taken away. The emotional weight of that potential loss grows heavier the longer you hold and the more profit accumulates. This creates a paradoxical situation where the more successful your trade becomes, the more anxious you feel. Early in the trade, when you're up $50, the potential loss is small. You can tolerate the uncertainty relatively easily. But when you're up $500, the stakes feel enormous. The fear of watching that $500 disappear becomes overwhelming. So you exit not because your trading plan says to, but because the emotional burden of holding has become intolerable. You're choosing relief over profit maximization. Research by behavioral economist Richard Thaler on what he calls the endowment effect shows that people value things more highly once they possess them. The moment your trade goes into profit, your brain begins treating that profit as something you own. Then holding the position feels like you're risking something you possess, rather than positioning for something you might gain. This subtle shift in framing dramatically affects your willingness to hold. When you enter a trade, you're risking capital to potentially gain profit. But once in profit, it feels like you're risking profit to potentially gain more profit, and your brain resists that framing. There's also social and self-image components. Many traders imagine explaining their trading decisions to others, or even to themselves. It's easy to justify closing a winner. You took profit, you made money, you did something right. But imagine having to explain how you watched a $300 winner turn into a $200 loser because you held too long. That feels embarrassing, like evidence of greed or poor judgment. This anticipated regret influences your decision making in real time. You exit early partly because you're protecting yourself from the narrative of having been greedy and losing. Here's something most traders don't consciously recognize but feel intensely. There's a gap between the satisfaction of making money and the satisfaction of making the optimal amount of money. When you close a winner early, there's immediate gratification. You made money. The trade worked. Your analysis was correct. That feels good. But there's also a lingering dissatisfaction when you watch the position continue moving in your direction after you've exited. You made money, but you could have made more. That dissatisfaction can actually be more psychologically uncomfortable than taking a small loss. According to research on counterfactual thinking, people experience stronger negative emotions when they compare actual outcomes to better possible outcomes than when they compare actual outcomes to worst possible outcomes. In other words, making $200 on a trade, but knowing you could have made $500 if you'd held, is often more emotionally painful than losing $100 on a trade. The loss is clean. You were wrong. The trade didn't work. You move on. But the early exit creates this nagging comparison between what you got and what you could have gotten. This creates a destructive cycle. You close a winner early, feel the immediate relief and satisfaction, then watch it continue and feel regret. That regret is uncomfortable, so the next time you're in a winning trade, you tell yourself you're going to hold for the full target this time. But as the profit accumulates, the same neural and psychological forces kick in. The certainty drive, the loss aversion, the fear of reversal. So you close early again. More immediate relief, more subsequent regret. Over and over, you repeat this pattern, always intending to do better next time, but always succumbing to the same psychological pressures in the moment. What makes this particularly insidious is that closing early is rewarded in the short term. You secured profit. Your account balance increased. Your emotional state shifted from uncertainty to certainty. These are real, tangible rewards that happen immediately. The cost of closing early, which is the profit you didn't capture, is abstract. It's a hypothetical. You don't actually lose money by closing early. You just don't make as much as you could have. Your brain has a hard time treating opportunity cost as a real cost, even though mathematically it absolutely is. Research in behavioral psychology shows that immediate reinforcement is far more powerful than delayed consequences in shaping behavior. Every time you close early and feel relief, you're reinforcing that behavior pattern even as you consciously wish you'd held longer. You're training yourself to repeat the exact behavior you're trying to eliminate. Breaking this cycle requires understanding that the immediate satisfaction of closing is actually your enemy disguised as your friend. There's another psychological factor that drives premature exits, and it involves how traders relate to profit targets. Most traders set targets, which is good practice, but then they create problems by how they think about those targets once in the trade. Let's say your target is a 3-to-1 risk-reward ratio, meaning if you risked $100, your target is $300 profit. You enter the trade, and it starts moving in your direction. When you're up $100, you've achieved a 1-to-1 ratio. When you're up 200, it's 2-to-1. Your target is 300, but 200 feels like a lot. It's twice what you risked. It's real money. Here's where the psychology gets tricky. Your brain starts making comparisons. $200 is less than 300, but it's more than 0. It's more than 100. It's a good profit. You start justifying why 200 is actually sufficient. Maybe the market is showing signs of reversal. Maybe you should take what the market is giving you. Maybe 300 was too ambitious. All of these thoughts are your brain trying to rationalize taking the certain 200 rather than holding for the uncertain 300. According to research on satisficing versus maximizing by psychologist Barry Schwartz, people tend to fall into two categories. Maximizers always seek the best possible outcome. Satisficers seek outcomes that are good enough. In trading, most people are satisficers, even if they're maximizers in other areas of life, because the emotional discomfort of holding winners is so acute. $200 is good enough, even though your plan called for 300. The problem is that satisficing in trading systematically underperforms maximizing if your targets are properly calibrated to your edge. There's also the issue of mental accounting. Each trade becomes its own mental account. When you're up $200 on this trade, your brain evaluates that in isolation. $200 is a win. Close the account with a profit. But this narrow focus ignores the bigger picture. Your trading edge over 100 trades might depend on occasionally catching those full $300 winners. By consistently satisficing at 200, you're degrading your overall expectancy. You're winning the individual account, but losing the portfolio game. Research on narrow framing and decision-making shows that people make different choices when they view decisions in isolation versus when they view them as part of a series. If you could see all your trades simultaneously, you'd recognize that holding for full targets on some trades is essential even if individual trades feel uncomfortable. But because you experience trades sequentially, one at a time, you make the choice that feels best for this trade right now without considering the cumulative effect across all trades. So what do you actually do about all this? How do you overcome these deep neurological and psychological drives to close winners early? The answer isn't willpower. Willpower fails when you're under stress, and holding a winning trade is inherently stressful given everything we've discussed. You need systematic approaches that remove or reduce the psychological burden. First, you need to reframe what closing a trade means. According to research on cognitive reframing, how you describe an action to yourself affects how you feel about it and whether you can execute it. Instead of thinking, "I'm taking profit," think, "I'm executing my plan." Instead of "I'm locking in gains," think, "I'm trading my edge." This reframe shifts focus from the immediate outcome to the process. When you've executed your plan, whether that means holding to your target or exiting at your stop, you've succeeded. Success is process adherence, not profit on this individual trade. Second, use mechanical exit rules that remove discretion. If your target is $300 profit and your rule is to exit when price touches that level, you've eliminated the decision point. There's no moment where you're choosing between 200 now or 300 later. The trade runs until it hits your target or your stop. According to research on implementation intentions, creating specific if-then rules dramatically increases follow-through. If price hits my target, then I exit. If price hits my stop, then I exit. No evaluation, no decision, just execution. Third, practice holding with partial exits. Take a portion of the position off at a level that satisfies your need for certainty while leaving a portion to run to your full target. If you're up $200 and feeling the urge to close, exit half the position and let the other half continue. This satisfies your limbic system's demand for immediate certainty while allowing your prefrontal cortex's plan to play out. Research on compromise strategies shows that people can often sustain discipline longer when they're allowed small rule violations that don't completely abandon the plan. Fourth, increase your position sizing gradually. If closing early stems partly from fear of loss reversal, and that fear is proportional to the dollar amount at risk, then temporarily reducing position size reduces the emotional weight. Trade smaller, so that a $300 winner feels less significant. Once you've proven to yourself that you can hold to targets at smaller size, gradually increase. This is essentially exposure therapy for the discomfort of holding winners. You're building tolerance for the emotional state by starting at a manageable level. Fifth, keep a specific journal section on trades closed early. Don't just record that you exited early. Track what you were feeling, what you were thinking, what justification you gave yourself. Also track what happened after you exited. Did the trade hit your original target? How much profit did you leave on the table? This creates concrete feedback about the cost of the behavior. Research shows that awareness and measurement of a behavior often reduces its frequency even without conscious intervention. When you see over time that you've left thousands of dollars on the table by closing early, it creates motivation for change that abstract understanding doesn't provide. Here's the final piece that ties everything together. The reason letting winners run is so crucial, and therefore the reason overcoming the urge to close early is so important, is that in most profitable trading strategies, your overall profitability depends on a relatively small number of large wins. According to research analyzing thousands of retail trading accounts, the typical pattern is that the largest 10% of winning trades account for more than 50% of total profits. If you're systematically cutting those large wins short, you're destroying the engine of your profitability. This is why the strategy of taking profits when you have them sounds wise, but is often disastrous in practice. Yes, you ensure that winning trades produce some profit, but you also ensure that you never capture those exceptional moves that actually make your strategy profitable over time. It's like hitting singles in baseball, but never swinging for extra bases. You'll have a decent batting average, but you won't drive in many runs. In trading terms, you'll have a high win rate, but a poor risk-reward ratio, and the math doesn't work. The psychological challenge is that the largest wins are also the most uncomfortable to hold because they accumulate the most profit that could reverse. The trades that matter most for your long-term success are exactly the trades where the urge to close early is strongest. That's the cruel irony. Your psychology is working directly against your profitability. The solution isn't to eliminate the discomfort. It's to develop the capacity to act correctly despite the discomfort. Think of it as training. The first time you hold a large winner all the way to your target despite every fiber of your being screaming to close early, it's excruciating. But you're building a new neural pathway. The next time is slightly easier. After you've done it 20 times, it becomes more familiar. After 50 times, it's starting to become automatic. You're not eliminating the discomfort. You're developing the strength to act despite it. Research on habit formation shows that behaviors become automatic through repetition in the face of the cues that trigger them. Each time you feel the urge to close and you hold instead, you're weakening that old pathway and strengthening a new one. The traders who succeed long-term aren't necessarily smarter or more analytical. They're not predicting price movement better. They're simply executing their plans more consistently. And a huge part of that execution is letting winners run to their targets instead of closing them prematurely. They've done the psychological work to overcome the natural human drives we've discussed. They feel the same urges you do. They just don't act on them. And that makes all the difference between a trading career that thrives and one that struggles endlessly despite understanding the technical aspects perfectly. The question isn't whether you'll feel the urge to close early. You will. The question is what you'll do when that urge arrives. Will you act on it, or will you act on your plan? That choice, repeated hundreds of times, determines everything.